This is Joshua Tree with Butterfly Power, and we have a very exciting video today looking at the renovation of a historical commercial property within rural Utah. And through this renovation, going to integrate a hybrid generation and storage microgrid with both solar thermal and solar electric, and how through this renovation we can achieve several positive impacts for the project. First is honoring the rich historical heritage of the property within the community, and through the integration of this new technology, create several positive impacts within the project. Really increasing the property value through expanding the square footage interior, but also through the exterior through improvements that allow for all season operations in the high mountains of Utah, creating real efficiency in the CapEx and the OpEx of the project from an operational perspective, and wrapping it all together to create a more sustainable and regenerative, both economically and energetically and environmentally project. So let's dive right in. The Creamery is a building that sits within a community that has a rich agricultural heritage, and the Creamery represents, what was really a coalescence of many dairy farms within the community. So it's a unique opportunity to honor that heritage, while also bringing it into creating, new opportunities. And here we can see a beautiful picture. The building was built in the early 1900s, in a very stunning building with this incredible street side view that we want to really continue to honor and accentuate. And when we look at the property from overhead, we can see that we have a street side view and then a mountain and a valley views to the east. And so the intention is, how do we really honor the old, and through those project intentions, honor the historical heritage of the Creamery and the ag community, create an architecturally stunning renovation that's optimizes for the street side, very public view, and then to create a renovation for successful commercial operations. And yet to the east, we have an opportunity to bring in the new. And in this, create property improvements that really optimize for these beautiful mountain and valley views, create an expansion of covered decks, patios, and parking that expands revenue generating spaces for all seasons, a significant CapEx reduction in the renovation. Here we're going to see a decrease of 70 to 80% of renovation and improvement costs, but also an OpEx reduction through a decrease in operating costs, which will come from energy savings of having no gas or electric, but also a big decrease in the snow and ice management operations, which can be very extensive in northern Utah. And these also contribute to improved facility safety. Also brings in new revenue through energy opportunities in the project. We're installing several electric vehicle charging stations that can create a revenue stream from the public. Also the opportunity to sell tenants the energy that can be bundled with rent, and potentially creating a solar power purchase agreement, selling power back to the grid, or even a community solar project to allow other community members to be supported by the resiliency and the power by buying their power from a community solar PPA. And in general, just increasing the resilience for the facility and the local community by making it a more regenerative property. So we really want to focus on creating synergy between the old and the new. Here we can see the street side view of this, beautiful, stunning building. Back when it was operational as a creamery, there's a wonderful water wheel, and the concept is to bring that water wheel back into the north. And the only other visible addition from the street side is some bifacial solar-colored ADA EV parking down to the south. Here you can see the northwestern street side view of the building that exists today. And then here are the mountain and valley views to the east. This is looking at the roof level of this stunning valley in northern Utah. And we want to really design these improvements to really take advantage of this beautiful viewscape. Here's looking at the new roof while also adding a second floor. By putting a second floor into the roof structure, it expands the building square footage from 5,300 square feet to almost 7,300 square feet. And it creates this upper floor as a very dynamic space that can be office, retail, or event space. And this building is in a village mixed use, so it can also have some integrated residential. One particular application could be an apartment for on-site management, and then the integration of a deck to really access those mountain and valley views that also is dual use, and that creates the beginning of the covered patio that we're integrating to the east. And this building has some old masonry, so bringing in some steel and structural support to support the second level as well as the decks and to take the pressure off of the masonry system. So the big concept or principle that we want to look at is architectural solar. This is a very broad category and one of the most transformational in construction in total today, which is how do we integrate solar technology into the buildings themselves? And it has two major fields. One is called BIPV, or Building Integrated Photovoltaics, and the second is BAPV, or Building Applied Photovoltaics. BIPV is integrating them with the building, and BAPV is integrating them on the building. In this project, we're going to focus specifically on BIPV. And here's a wonderful resource for architectural solar in general called ASA, which is Architectural Solar Association. There's a link to an incredible report down here below that goes into detail all of the opportunities. But from the image from the report, we can see the many different opportunities to integrate BIPV, which can be roof decks. You can do curtain walls. You can integrate it into the roof itself. It can be deck railings. You can do it as spandrels and balustrades and also create separate structures outside of the building that allow us to integrate architectural solar and BIPV. Here's another leading agriculture or architectural solar company called Onyx. They're one of the oldest and most advanced that make a whole spectrum of custom solar panel sizes and custom translucency, but wanted to reference, this is a case study from a Salt Lake City building in which they integrated a balustrade with architectural solar. And just to really highlight the economics from a Salt Lake City property where they have an ROI of 2.1 to 4.5%, depending on which panel type, an IRR of 16 to almost 35% with a 2.1 to a 1-year payback time, and also how it increased the building's value. Another critical aspect of architectural solar is solar panels are the strongest, most highly engineered glass on the planet that have guarantees to operate at 80% for 25 to now 35 and 40 years for many manufacturers. And you can see this highlighted here, that they're calculating the useful life of these panels 35 years. So compared to other building and roofing materials, it has a really long warranty in which they're guaranteed to operate. So we want to really focus on multi-use improvements and how we can use dual and triple use with the improvements that we're making. So looking in the energy, looking at architectural solar with both BIPV and bifacial, but also integrating thermal hybrid PVT or PV thermal systems. How this integrates with the structural, creating covered areas, but we're also integrating radiant heated systems from the foundations. So we're going to look at the BIPV in kilowatts. The PVT thermal makes kilowatts, but also has kilowatt thermals, and then the square footage of the exterior and the interior for the improvements that are being created. So the only panels we're putting in the roof is some bifacial solar skylights, and we're going to go through and look at the high level of the project and the economics, and through the rest of the video, we're going to provide really great illustrations of some of the potential of this technology for anyone who this is new to. So we're only putting 12 panels, which creates 6 kilowatts into the skylights. The deck creates 600 square feet of deck space that then gets a solar deck awning, which is 9 kilowatts. That also creates 600 square feet of covered patio below it. Then we bring in a bifacial solar patio, which is 18 kilowatts. And together we've now created a 1,400 square foot covered patio with bifacial solar that also has 1,400 square feet of radiant heat. Then looking at bringing in some electric vehicle covered charging. This specific covered parking is the hybrid PVT or thermal that creates both electricity and thermal power. And the amazing part about solar energy is most of it is heat. So in this, you can see that the panels produce 13 kilowatts of electrical, but 32 kilowatt therms or thermal equivalents. So it's almost 3 times the amount that comes in for thermal that will create a lot of energy for the extensive radiant heating that we have within this facility renovation. Then we're optioned to put in another covered parking to the south. This would be bifacial, creating 15 kilowatts, and then ADA solar covered parking down to the southwest corner. So looking at the covered parking in total, we've now created 1,800 square feet of covered parking and 1,800 square feet of radiant heated parking. The rest of the facility then gets radiant heated concrete, which allows for really advanced snow and ice management. And this is one of the areas we can really decrease the operational expenses for managing snow and ice and also improve the facility safety. Putting an integrated ice and snow melt system around the edge of the roof. And in the interior, looking at on the 2 floors, putting 3,000 square feet on the first floor and 2,000 square feet of radiant floors, walls, and ceilings, allowing for this integration of the thermal energy to really efficiently and cost effectively provide all the energy for this extensive radiant heating operation. So you can see the totals here, what we've created from energy, the covered area, and the radiant heated in exterior and the interior. So looking at the property solar location, this is in the summer. This property has a really wonderful east, west, and southern exposure. And you can see that all of the improvements have been designed to really optimize the generation profile. What's really great about east-west is that you get the first of the morning sun as the sun rises and the sunset along with great exposure that comes from the south. And then we can also see it at the winter solstice, how it decreases as the sun goes lower in the sky. So just summarizing the solar generation profile and how it's tuned to the east and west per each of the improvements. And this is a grid-connected solar and storage microgrid with the local utility, which is Rocky Mountain Power. So here's a view from the south and the view corridor. And just to highlight as we integrate this, there are some issues with some cottonwood trees and maple trees. And to the southern view corridor, there's going to have to be some vegetation management to both preserve that street side view, but also to optimize for the solar integrations. While we're putting a second level in this building, everything that we're referencing here could also have roof integrated solar. Oftentimes there's a default to putting solar on the roof. So in this example, we're really going to understand how we can utilize it to create other improvements beyond the roof, but you could do a beautiful roof integrated solar system as well and achieve similar results. So just summing up the project economics and getting an overview of the property, not only are we making these improvements around to the south, but it's a really wonderful property that has a beautiful forest garden up to the north with incredible agricultural streams that flow through the property. And the integration of the historic water wheel will just be a beautiful, not only feature to add with the agricultural stream, but really the integration of that rich heritage. And there's developments that are going on around that are allowing for hiking, horse, and walking trails that would integrate from the north. And when we sum up the project tax credits, grants, and rebates, we're really focusing on the big 3, which are the 30% solar investment tax credit. This is a federal tax credit. Also really looking at the USDA REAP grant, which is a cash rebate that comes at project completion of 40%, and the depreciation, in this case, the accelerated depreciation or MACRS on all of the solar integrated equipment. And it should be noted that there are many more local, state, and federal programs that a project like this could also integrate. And in this case, we're going to pull in one for the electric vehicle charging, which is a specific rebate that you get 50% back up to $75,000 on integrating electric vehicle charges into a property. So it'll be the big 3 plus 1 that'll allow us to achieve an 80% cost reduction in the CapEx for the project. So to touch on REAP, REAP is a very powerful and old program that comes from the USDA, which is to promote energy efficiency and renewable energy for agricultural producers and small businesses through grants. And just to check on eligibility, it's agricultural producers who may be in rural or non-rural area. But in this case, this is for a small business that is in a designated rural area. And we'll look at the eligibility matrix. And so just to highlight the power of the program, the REAP program was recently expanded under the Inflation Reduction Act, which increased the grant amount and made it more accessible to a wider range of businesses. The program guidelines are it's a maximum grant up to 40% of the project's eligible costs in 2 categories. Energy efficiency, which is up to a $500,000 maximum grant, and renewable energy projects, which is up to $1 million in a grant. It should be noted that the grant assistance is taxable and requires a technical report and an energy audit, and that this is an annually funded program that's actually been funded out several years now through the Inflation Reduction Act. but projects are chosen through a competitive process. So it isn't a guarantee that you would get the grant, but projects like this would be very competitive. So diving into these two different categories, renewable energy projects up to $1 million grant back is very broad. This is small and large solar, small and large wind, hydro, biomass, geothermal, anaerobic digesters, and ocean. So basically all forms of renewable energy and energy efficiency improvements. And this is, again, a very broad category that for anything that makes the building or the facility more efficient. So it's $500,000 maximum grant back in building envelope, lighting, insulation, HVAC, heating, irrigation, water, power system, refrigeration, drying, curing, fans, blowers, compressors, and pumps. Very broad. And what's unique about this project is we're actually going to put a lot more into the energy efficiency category because of the location's ability to only install so much solar. So to have these two categories that work in concert to get up to $1.5 million back and 40% of the project cost is a very powerful tool to improve project economics. So just checking on the eligibility, there's a link here to the REAP eligibility website. You just put in any address, and you can see that the Creamery project is in the area, but also note all the green around it, that all of the properties within the valley are also REAP eligible and could use some form of a similar approach or strategy. So we're going to look at the budget in total now and wrap into these improvements, and then we're going to go and look at some of the specific features and example for technology providers. So the project renovation budget is $2.5 million, and we can see that we're integrating it across the exact same categories of architectural, solar, electric, and thermal. This is creating 70 kilowatts in total of electrical and 32 kilowatt therms. And then as you go down and look at the categories, the building integrated PV and the hybrid solar PVT, these are falling into the top category, which is renewable energy generation and storage. Moving over, then we have the microgrid. The microgrid will be for the solar, but also can integrate into the renovation energy and efficiency improvements through the REAP grant, the other electrical within the renovation that make the property more efficient. So we've split between those two categories. Moving into energy storage, here we're going to look at long duration energy storage, which are flow batteries. And what the sizing of a project this like will need is going to be a lot of factors. What you need, the facility, there's a lot of electric vehicle chargers, and then are you integrating PPA where you're providing grid support services? In this model, we're putting a 500 kilowatt power flow battery with a 2 megawatt hour of energy storage. And for the thermal side, 500 kilowatt hour therms of energy storage. Similar to the electrical, then we move into the hydronic heating and cooling system where we have plumbing. A lot of the plumbing costs go to integrate the PVT and all of the radiant system. But additionally, in the energy efficiency category, we can include all the other plumbing that makes the project more efficient. Then moving into the radiant heating, in the interior, this is floor, ceilings, and walls, which will create a very efficient, warm space within the building, but also allows us to put that in the energy efficiency category for the renovation. And then on the exterior, we're looking at the radiant heating, the integrated snow and ice melt system, and well as the irrigation can go in the energy efficiency category. Put in the roof of $150,000. And then here we put the building structural steel. That actually doesn't qualify for any of these, but put it onto the budget here. And then in the covered areas, the integration of the solar with the deck, the patio, and the covered parking can fall into the renewable energy generation and storage category. And then we're putting in 8 EV chargers. And you can see here down at the bottom that gets in the rebate for $75,000. So summing up here, we can see how all of these are integrated into each of the categories. And then in tax credits, we have the federal investment tax credit of 30% and solar system modified accelerated depreciation, which in 2023 allows for 100% bonus. What we get to in year one is from a $2.5 million renovation budget, $960,000 of that comes back in a cash grant that is paid at project completion and can be pre-approved by getting the grant application accepted. Then there's $435,000 in a federal income tax credit, $366,000 in accelerated depreciation, and the $75,000 cash rebate for the chargers. So the total is 1.83 million in tax credits, grants, and rebates, which puts the net renovation cost at $663,000, or 27% of the renovation budget. It's been outlined here. So it's a very powerful combination of the big 3+1, and a project like this could integrate other tax credits, grants, and rebates from federal, state, and local. So want to just really dive into this a little bit about how powerful it is when we put the primary energy system as the renovation mechanism. So here we're looking at the exterior improvements of the bifacial solar patio, the covered parking, and the associated radiant heating foundations. So when we look at specifically the two parking up to the north, this is going to require retaining walls and earthwork. Then you have the foundation, the radiant heat system, the actual structure itself, and then the solar. All of those, because they're being built for the solar, can get the 30% ITC, 40% REAP, and the depreciation that can happen in 1 to 5 years versus longer term depreciation. So this covers a huge amount of the exterior improvements. But then when we look at the remaining parking lot and sidewalk foundations, the integrated hydronic snow and ice melt system, and the precision irrigation, they won't qualify for the ITC, but can fall into the 40% REAP efficiency category and standard depreciation for each of the different categories. So want to really look at how this plays out and how this financing structure can be benefited, particularly to multi-phase and multi-year projects. So just going through this quickly, you can see a project that you do a feasibility study, get into phase 1 permitting and planning, then you submit a REAP application. Then there's the REAP approval window, which would create the award, which allow then for phase 1 construction. But then this process can be repeated over several years. You can come back and get a REAP grant multiple times for the same projects. There's some specific guidelines around that. But even if you don't go back for REAP every single year, you could go back a second year. So it's a very powerful tool to be able to really achieve multiple benefits for projects that are going to take multiple years and multiple phases to create. So let's dive in and look at some of the features and provide some examples, not only of technology providers, but also the design flexibility. So here on the back patio, integrate a bifacial solar deck awning, which will create the 600 square feet of covered deck with radiant heating that comes in. And you can see this deck mechanism, particularly in the cold and snowy winters, where we have a radiant awning, radiant heated deck, and then also a radiant heated patio will create a very cozy winter environment that's also very efficient for snow and ice management. Then, looking underneath at this patio, here's a much more contemporary approach, but the ability to bring in brick and wood to really create a creamery aesthetic for this patio that'll allow for the beautiful access to the mountain and the valley views. And then here's an example of a restaurant in San Diego called Costera, who has a bifacial solar awning over their patio and also has radiant heat. So as we come in, here's the bifacial solar skylights. It's a really wonderful way to bring in natural light and to really integrate beautiful bifacial solar panels into the roof structure. You can also do bifacial solar windows, and then we're going to look at the covered parking. Again, aesthetics matter, and we want to create something that's architecturally stunning. So you can use wood. You can use many different approaches. You can create metal, and again, bringing in some brick would make this very creamery-esque. And to have covered parking that also has radiant heat is a very efficient way of managing parking and facility access through the big Utah winters. So just to dive into some of the technology on PVT hybrid thermal panels, here's two great companies called Dual Sun and Abora, and how the power of hybrid systems is really, really exponential, because you're going to get the electricity, and because the thermal system is pulling heat off of the panels, the electric side is more efficient because solar panels are big circuits. They want to be cooler, but you get up to 3 times the amount of power that's coming in heat. So hybrid PVT systems can produce 4 times more energy in price per square foot. And you can see a link on both of their websites for some great projects, but specifically from Dual Sun, we pulled a hybrid PVT solar covered parking that's powering an entire aquatic center. So all of the pools inside of it are coming from this exterior parking. And how the integration of radiant heated sidewalks and driveways can not only create a very pleasant but efficient facility, the integration of radiant roof, snow, melt, and ice systems. And here's an example of a sim, which is in Salt Lake City, the Heritage Park and Historic Project from Rihu. Really beautiful job. And this case study shows, just what a wonderful asset it's become as they chose to integrate this. So let's talk energy storage. And in this facility, we're going to look at both electrical, which can be short, 1 to 4 hours, traditionally lithium ion or lithium ferrous phosphate. But we're going to specifically integrate long duration energy storage, which is 4 to 12 hours, and then also advanced thermal storage, which is both for heating and cooling. So here's a wonderful American company called ESS that does long duration energy storage using flow batteries. Flow batteries are amazing for a number of factors when you compare them to lithium ion. First of all, they're totally non-toxic, earth abundant, using iron, salt, and water. Totally non-toxic and non-flammable with no explosion risk. But they also allow for longer duration. Instead of 1 to 4, which is traditionally the space that lithium ion has been in, now 4 to 12 hours become very possible. And they also have longer efficiency, almost unlimited cycles with no capacity loss and a better operating range. So it allows for all of these wonderful grid support services and facility resiliency that can create with a lot of benefits and less trade-offs from lithium ion. And here there's a wonderful Stone Edge farm case that's integrated these. But when we look at energy storage, this is from the Rocky Mountain Institute, a wonderful report to really understand all of the value that batteries can create at a facility, but also as grid support services. And there's a whole spectrum. But what's really want to highlight from this report is that on the facility side, it can be for backup power, to better manage self-consumption, demand charge, and time of use reduction, but can also provide valuable grid support services, which is black start and transmission deferral, and also resiliency for the local community. But to really highlight that the farther down in the energy value chain is, the more of these services that energy storage can create. So at a facility level, there's a lot of value that putting in advanced energy storage can really create, depending on what the local grid and community are desiring. And just to highlight, the importance of energy storage as an emerging field, and the Office of Energy in Utah did a wonderful series 2 summers ago, which is very extensive, covering the introduction, the economics, case studies, and finance, and really encourage anyone who's wanting to understand more about the amazing opportunity of integrating energy storage to go and check out these powerful sessions. So I want to tie this all together with 2 bigger concepts that a facility like this represents within the community. And this is of a virtual power plant. This is an example of Utah of what it was the country's largest virtual power plant. And a virtual power plant is just taking multiple microgrids and managing them together digitally to work not only as a cohesive grid, but also to integrate with the larger macro grid. So this is a 600 apartment complex that is net zero design as a distributed resource microgrid. So each of the apartment building has its own generation and has its own covered parking with electric vehicle charging. But this project is amazing because they put energy storage in each of the individual apartments, now allowing the tenants to be able to be players in the energy game, to be more efficient, but also to help the overall facility to be a more efficient, distributed, and decentralized microgrid. So there's links here. It's very exciting. But when we look at multiple projects, the opportunity to bring in a VPP is very powerful. And then to really show the power of solar and storage and how it can impact small rural towns in Utah. This is the first utility scale solar and storage project in Utah. Happened down in Panguitch, and it's on a 10-acre site with 650 kilowatts of single access tracking. The energy storage is 1 megawatt of power and 5 megawatt hours of energy storage. How long it can provide that 1 megawatt. And that's enough to provide 5 hours of energy to 250 homes. What I want to really highlight here is the importance of why it was chosen and the value it creates for this rural community. Panguitch is a town of 1,500, which is very similar to the community that this project is. And it's seasonally gets a lot of tourists because of its location to Bryce Canyon National Park. So when all of the tourists flows in, all of this power is needed for air conditioning and for all this huge expansion of operations within the town. And through the existing grid, that would cause brownouts and blackouts and flickering. So from Rocky Mountain Power, a facility, they needed to upgrade the transmission and the substation to send more power there, which is expensive. But instead, by co-locating solar and storage in a distributed and decentralized manner, now they've created both the generation and the storage that relieves that tension. So this was really integrated as a transmission and distribution upgrade deferral project. And similar to this project and what we're going to look at, this is a huge opportunity for rural towns and facilities within them to create more resiliency and more market opportunity to participate of how we can all play a part in making the grid more efficient. So wrapping this all together and looking from a portfolio perspective of how this facility can work within the larger community. So we have the 70 kilowatts of electrical, 32 kilowatt hours, the energy storage in both, and 8 electric vehicle chargers. Along with all of the property improvements of renovation that we've covered, now we could see other projects within the valley also creating their own separate microgrids, but we can begin to look at them together as a community solar project. And community solar being how other members of the community can purchase solar from one of the projects to help keep that revenue cycling within the community, but also get access to greater resiliency through energy storage and the fact that the power will be on. But now multiple facilities can come together and create something like a virtual power plant, similar to the Net Zero project of the apartments, where they can aggregate. And as this evolves, you could also see a rural power cooperative forming. Rural power cooperatives are the backbone, particularly for rural areas within the United States. So from an individual facility to how facilities can work together to better manage really presents an incredible opportunity for us to not only powerfully and positively impact project economics and how properties perform better for all the commercial operations through all seasons, but also how we can come together and create a much broader transformation. So hopefully you found this valuable. It's a very exciting project, and we are the butterfly generation. It's time to rise and shine. It's time to transform and fly.